Hi, I'm Lauren Wolf.
I'm Daniel Rossi,
I'm Monica Kim.
and our poem is called London, 1802.
Written by William Wordsworth in 1802. Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour. England hath need of thee. She is a fen of stagnant waters. Altar, sword, and pen, fireside, the heroic wealth of hall and bower, have forfeited their ancient English dower of inward happiness. We are selfish men. Oh, raise us up, return to us again, and give us manners, virtue, freedom, power. Thy soul was like a star, and dwelt apart. Thou hast a voice whose sound was like the sea, pure as the naked heavens, majestic, free. So didst thou travel in life's common way, in cheerful godliness, and yet thy heart the lowliest duties of herself did lay.
Alright, so a little background on William Wordsworth. He was born April 7th, 1770, and died April 23rd, 1850. He was mainly influenced by the French Revolution, which caused him to have many humanitarian beliefs. He also is known most famously for the Prelude, which is considered to be the best piece of English Romanticism.
Milton was an English poet in the 1600s who is most famous for his epic poem Paradise Lost, based off of the Bible's Genesis.
Okay, so before we go over this poem, there's a few words that we'd like to go over. So the first word we have is fen, and a fen is basically a swamp.
Our second word is bower, which is basically a home or a safe place where you can rest.
And finally, the word dower is a reference to the word dowry, which is a form of payment that either the man or the woman receives when they get married.
Alright, so before we actually dive into this poem, we need to state kind of what the situation is and what's kind of going on in the poem. So basically we have this guy Wordsworth who is talking about how London has kind of fallen back on itself and it's not really going anywhere. It used to be this kind of great society, but now it's just kind of become stagnant, it's not really moving ahead, and he's basically making an appeal to Milton to kind of help change what's become of London.
And along with that, I feel it's more of a historical setting on top of it, a reference to what was going on at that point. In the early 19th century, or 1802, as we know this is the title of the poem, during that time, London was at the beginning of an industrial revolution, and because of that, a lot of people started moving into big cities from small farms, trying to make it in the city. And because of that, there was a large population boom, which, you know, made times a little tough for people. People couldn't get as many jobs, and that kind of helped with a poverty situation.
And in consequence of this population boom, there were high poverty and crime rates and unsanitary conditions, and Wordsworth is trying to change all this through his poem.
Alright, so with the speaker of this poem, I think we can generally agree that it is Wordsworth and he's talking to a general audience, and the audience is kind of where we actually have different opinions. I personally think that it's talking to no one in particular. It's just kind of like stream of consciousness, it's coming off the top of your head. It's kind of a lot like if you were praying to something.
And that's where I agree that we disagree on that point. For I feel like Wordsworth is talking more to Milton directly. So the reason why I feel this is how it is because in the first word that he says is Milton! Exclamation point. So if I were to get someone's attention, like Daniel or Monica, either of you, I would say Monica or Daniel with an exclamation point. And I feel like that's what Wordsworth is trying to do here, to address Milton specifically.
Okay, I can say it. Monica?
And I have a different opinion. My opinion is that the poem addresses the people of England itself, and this fits into the central purpose because it's an encouragement to change and return to the good old days, as shown in the poem. The people have forfeited their ancient English dower of inward happiness, referring to their cultural pride and how the people have started to...
Okay, so along with the feel of the poem, there's a bunch of little bits and pieces to it that we were going to talk about. So we have the tone, diction, syntax, meter, all that stuff. So let's first start out with the tone. We had a little bit of a disagreement here because I personally still think it's a stream of consciousness. I feel like it's just kind of running off of... It's just kind of going, and it doesn't really feel like it has a stop, so it just kind of feels like talking.
So more fluid. It feels like a fluid tone to you.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree again that we disagree, because I feel like it's more factual, as if he's stating more of a fact. He's more determined about what he's saying. It's not really a stream of consciousness. He's like, oh, I'm just thinking this. It's like, no, I know this to be true. As in, we are selfish men. He states it, he doesn't have a question mark, he states it as if this is true, and the whole poem is true because of that.
Monica?
And my opinion is that it's emotional, it's an appeal to change, and you can see this by the inclusion of statements like Milton and O that use exclamation points.
Alright, so moving on to diction, a few of the words that stood out to us the most was the word stagnant, because it says it's not really a word that you would use to describe something that's bad, but you don't usually use it to describe something that's good. So the state of London is stagnant, where it's not bad, but it's not actually good at the same time.
Another word that was interesting to us was the word forfeited, which implies that the character, the morality that the people had, it wasn't taken away from them, but that they actually gave it up of their own will.
And so one other word that at least I personally found was particularly clever was the word fen, which we already have gone over, means swamp. Now I feel like it kind of brings a more scholarly feel to the poem, because you don't use the word fen very often. You'd say swamp or muck. So the fact that he used fen shows that he clearly thought about it and shows that he knows what he's talking about.
Alright, and going on to syntax, we think that it's basically constructed with a stream of consciousness, and it has a rhyme scheme to it, but it's just kind of very fluid, it goes along, it's kind of like what Lauren said, where it's just there's a very fluid movement to it.
And so from that we can go on to meter, and we have decided that it's iambic pentameter from the number of syllables per line, about 10 to 11. The rhyme scheme, which is ABBA, ABBA, CD, EF. And on top of it, it's an Italian sonnet motive, and you can also recognize that by its kind of square shape. So if you come across an Italian sonnet in the middle of the night, you know it should be a square shape.
And there is a shift in the poem between lines 5 and 6, which changes from "we are selfish men," the end of describing the situation, to "thy soul was like," which is the part where Wordsworth starts beseeching Milton and praising him.
Exactly. Alright, so the imagery that we have here is there's a lot of nature imagery. So one of them is, of course, the fen of stagnant waters, which is obviously referring to just kind of a pool of stagnant water. We have the star, the mention of the star, and the voice like the sea, and the heavens. It's very nature-ish imagery. It's it kind of invokes the mind to think about nature.
And so while we're on those, I'd like to go into simile and overstatement. Thy soul was like the sea, and thy had a sound was like the sea. That's overstatement. No one has a voice like the sea. And so on to simile, thy soul was like a star, thy sound whose voice is like the sea, and then England, she is a fen. None of that's true. No one has a soul that's a star. No one has a sound like the sea, and no, England isn't a thing of stagnant waters.
Yeah.
It's just a playful metaphor that he used.
Exactly.
And there's one allusion in the poem which refers to Milton's greatest work, Paradise Lost, which chronicles humanity's loss of Eden in Genesis of the Bible. And this is related to the poem in the line, "forfeited their ancient English dower of inward happiness," which relates to Genesis in that the people have lost their paradise or their own morality.
All right. So I think that's pretty much it. Thank you, Lauren, for coming out. Thank you, Monica, for coming out. Thank you for
Daniel.
listening to our podcast.
Thank you.